and we have amongst us as lead panelist Dr. Frank Laxo from GMDAC, Professor S.K. Sasikumar, Senior Fellow of VV Giri National Labour Institute, Shahbaz Khan from NSDC, and Vinay Kumar from EMIGRATE team. Before we begin, let me make a few housekeeping announcements as we do in each of our panel discussions. We request everyone apart from the main speakers to turn off their audios and keep their videos also switched off. We'll later on have a dedicated session for Q&A and views from the participants, so you may turn your videos and audios on when we take interventions from the floor. When one speaker is speaking, I request all others to keep their audios on mute. The main speakers may keep their videos turned on, but all others should keep it on mute. And in between, if we see any disturbance, we'll have to mute it from our end. You may also use the group chat option to drop it any comments which the moderator may be able to see from her end as well. With those few logistical announcements, let me welcome you all to this discussion. I'm delighted to welcome our CEO, Joint Secretary Shri Abbagani Ramu. I also welcome our PG Shri Yogeshwar Sangwan, all other officials from the MEA, friends and colleagues who have joined us from various organizations, think tanks, and members from the academia. I'll now request our CEO, Shri Abbagani Ramu, to make his inaugural remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. A warm welcome to all panelists and moderator. Professor Debalina Kundu, National Institute of Urban Affairs. Dr. Frank Laxo, Director, GMADC. Professor S.K. Sasikumar, VV Giri National Institute of Labour. Mr. Shahbaz Khan, National Skill Development Corporation. Mr. Vinay Kumar, a technical specialist of EMIGRATE portal. Is it any problem with the video you face?
It's shaking a little, sir. The screen is shaking a little.
Okay, anyway. So once again, warm welcome to all the panelists and participants for this session on evidence-based approach to migration issues, challenges and solutions for data collection. As we all of us are aware that for any effective policy making, the data is very important. Data and information is very important. And particularly when the issues related to migration, which are very dynamic and fluid, the importance of this data collection and evidence-based approach becomes more and more relevant. Ministry of External Affairs is a main agency which keeps data related to migration, especially immigration. So we have a web portal called EMIGRATE, which basically collects the data of migrants, particularly going from India to immigration check required countries. So we have a concept called immigration check required countries, where there are some select 17, 18 countries where the people, particularly with a lower qualification, below graduate level, they're expected to take the prior permission, and they're also expected to register with this EMIGRATE portal. So especially this EMIGRATE portal gives us the data migrants going abroad. So with this data, we are able to make very effective policies relevant to migrants, particularly when they are abroad. So in our embassies and consulates, we have a fund called Indian Community Welfare Fund to take care of the migrant related issues. So the fund is given for them with some certain criteria. So this data is especially important for us to make the effective policy in respect of whether ICWF, Indian Community Welfare Fund, or also other relevant schemes like the National Insurance Scheme for the migrants, and also pre-departure orientation training migrants before they depart the country. So this is the initiative which we have for collection of data. But after recent situation where we are facing COVID-19, the data become more important, especially when a lot of people who became jobless and uh, stranded, they are expected to return to India. So we have various initiatives to bring them back. So one of the initiatives is called Vande Bharat Mission. That is basically repatriating the people stranded outside, and through which we could collect lot of data who want to come back to India. So another scheme is to collect data and analyze the various categories of migrants. There is a separate website created with the cooperation of Ministry of External Affairs and Ministry of Skill Development to get the data of people who are returning to India and also analyzing their capabilities and skills. So the skill mapping and different capabilities also able to collect. So these are the two main ways which we are able to collect data, but at the same time, the government of India is able to collect the data at various Indian embassies and consulates through various mechanisms. But for example, the people, migrants who entered a contract with the employer abroad, so when they enter contract, they have to register with the Embassy of India or Consulate of India. So that way, the data related to NRIs, particularly the migrants, is being collected. But at the same time, the people who are settled outside, like overseas Indians, their data also being collected through our scheme called Overseas Citizen of India. It is a kind of a lifelong visa for Indian origin foreign nationals. So that is also database being created through this Overseas Citizen of India scheme. So while this data collection is being done, but it is also important to make the data collection more effective and useful, make it cost effective. The collection of data is become cost effective and easier. So there various initiatives are further required, particularly the coordination between various government of agencies is required. As I said that while MEA, Ministry of External Affairs, is a nodal agency which is collecting data about labor, but we can also collaborate with various other agencies which are keeping data. For example, the Bureau of Immigration, which keeps the data of people coming into India and going out of India, which may be much more broad-based, but of which we can also correlate with migrants who are going out, and if there are some gaps, which we can fill the gaps. And at the same time, this data and the information related to migrants is useful in the way to project the contribution made by these migrants in various countries. It can be from India to I think there is some network related issue. I lost video, but now I started again.
Yeah, we lost the video and sound.
Is audible?
Now it's audible, but it's no video.
So perhaps you may speak without the video so that we can at least hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just try once again. Now I think I can be seen now.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry for that inconvenience. But at the same time, as I said, the data collection also can be used to project the contribution made by the migrant labor in the destination countries. So that kind of data is useful to quell the some negative impression about the migrants coming into their countries. So that is the way it is important to project. But at the same time, their projection, their data is available to project the way they are contributing to the development of economy. So that is another aspect of the data collection. So while these are the important issues, so today's initiative by ICM is very relevant for all of us, especially when so many experts are joining us today's discussion. It is more relevant for Ministry of External Affairs and also ICM to learn and improve further the data collection and to make it more user-friendly and more effective. And this will also be useful for us in India, especially for India, because nowadays there is a more and more requirement, rising need of regional and international cooperation and the comparability of data between the countries. So to have a very good, effective regional cooperation, international cooperation, also this data is very important. So in this context, I'm hoping to see very useful and fruitful discussions today. And with these few words, I once again welcome all the participants and the speakers for this discussion. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll just introduce the moderator of the day, who will thereafter introduce the panelists as we go on. So Professor Debalina Kundu is a professor at the National Institute of Urban Affairs, and she has more than 25 years of professional experience in the field of development studies. She was a postdoctoral fellow with the ICSR and has a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University on urban governance. She has worked as a consultant with numerous agencies ranging from ICMPD, ADB, IIDS, UNDP, UNICEF, and I could go on. She also has a number of publications and several books and journal articles. Currently, she is editing books on international migration and national urban policies. I would now request Professor Devalina Kundu to moderate the session.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
You can proceed.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank ICM and MEA for inviting me to moderate this important panel discussion on strengthening evidence-based approach to migration policies, challenges and solutions for data collection. The discussion will be focused on the following issues: identify existing substantive and operational challenges in collection migration related data, which is very important. Again, forging regional and international cooperative partnerships in migration data collection, identifying good practices, strengthening existing migration data collection mechanisms, expanding the range of data collection by including socio-economic indicators. I think that's a very important thing which we researchers face when we are working on this in this area. Identify methods for utilizing digital innovations, create avenues for open and free access of data, and establish progressive collaborations within government departments, international organizations, and educational institutions who are engaged in data collection, as well as analysis. I think collection doesn't end there. Analysis is the most important part of it. So without wasting much time, let me introduce the first speaker. Each speaker will have 12 minutes time. I will give a buzz after 10 minutes to wrap up in the next 2 minutes. We have as the first speaker, Dr. Frank Laxo. He's the director, GMDAC. He has over 2 decades of professional experience working in the field of international migration. His previous post was with IOM in Budapest, Vienna, and Geneva. He has also acted as a consultant for UNHCR, ILO, and OECD. He is currently the co-chair of the UN Expert on Migration Statistics and co-editor of Migration Policy Practice. He has published reports on a wide range of migration issues, including migration and development, labor migration, irregular migration, migration and environment, and migration governance. Dr. Frank, the floor is yours. You have 12 minutes.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Right. Now I shall try to share the screen. I don't know if you have the PowerPoint there, but I'm just going to bring it up. I'm going to do 3 things in this presentation. And first of all, let me say that it's a great honor to be able to speak to you today. I was delighted to receive this invitation last week. Can you see my screen? Can you see anything?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. So, look, since I only have 12 minutes, I want to focus on 3 things. One is give you a sense of what's happening internationally, globally, with respect to migration statistics and migration data. For many years, there have been many recommendations at international meetings calling for better data on migration, but we haven't seen very much action in this area. Now, in the last few months, last few weeks, we're really seeing some momentum building up, and the UN and IOM are beginning to give much more priority to migration, to improving data on migration. Secondly, I want to briefly reflect on the question of how do you develop a national migration data strategy? Most countries do not have an explicit migration data strategy. Migration is a cross-cutting issue. It affects many different ministries. There are many different actors and stakeholders. The public sector and the private sector both collect data on migration. Also NGOs and international organizations. And as was mentioned earlier, there are different countries involved in collecting data about your citizens. So it's a complex, challenging matter to try and develop a national migration data strategy in line with your own priorities. And most countries don't really have an explicit strategy. They have partial strategies. And I want to say a few words about that. And then thirdly, I just want to tell you a little bit about what we do at the Global Migration Data Analysis Center in Berlin, and suggest some ways in which we can help you potentially with issues such as how to support data innovation or data capacity development. So the first slide. Only in the last few weeks, IOM, after so many years, has for the first time launched its first migration data strategy. And we had only a couple of weeks ago our first discussion with our member states in Geneva about this strategy. This is something that the new Director General regards as a priority for IOM, and it's part of his strategic vision for the organization that we should become a more evidence-based organization. At the same time, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, in May of this year, launched, after 75 years, the UN's first explicit data strategy. It's a 77-page document. I don't have much time to talk about it, but it's going to affect the work of all of us working in this UN space. Thirdly, I'm the co-chair of the expert group on migration statistics. Some of you might know that in 1998, the UN issued international recommendations advising countries on how they should collect data on migration. They're currently updating that guidance because we're living in a very different world from 1998, and that guidance will be issued next year. And although it's not binding, it may have implications for India and other countries. And then lastly, something that nobody could predict is the global pandemic. And this, as you will see in the next slide, and I'm sure you're aware of, the COVID-19 is already having an important impact on the ability of national statistical offices to collect data on migration. And a recent survey carried out by the World Bank and the UN Statistics Division shows how many countries around the world are being affected. We have some special results just on migration, and we have seen that a number of countries have decided to delay censuses or postpone surveys, etc. At the same time, because mobility has been affected worldwide, many countries are increasingly interested in this subject and asking for more data. So on the one hand, we have the challenges of collecting face-to-face data on migration, and on the other hand, there are increasing demands from policymakers. Very briefly, IOM, as I mentioned, has decided that migration data, improving data on migration, is going to be a key priority for the organization for the next few years. I don't have time to go through all of this, but just to remind you, IOM is an operational organization, and we collect data for many different purposes. And the first reason why we collect the data is to try to assist migrants and to offer them greater protection. And data has been very important in our humanitarian work. But we also use data to advise governments on how to manage migration, how to plan our projects, how to evaluate the impact of what we're doing. We regularly inform the media about migration, and we are committed to helping countries report on the SDGs and the Global Compact on migration. So there are many reasons why we need to invest in data on migration. And we have summed all of this up. There is a document which I can share with you, which provides more detail about how we plan to move forward in developing this strategy. We've identified 3 broad areas of work, 3 key objectives. One is trying to address key data gaps. For example, the lack of data on international flows of migrants. A second area is to work much more closely with our member states to support their efforts to build their national capacities to improve data on migration. And thirdly, we want to ensure that everyone working in IOM takes a much more evidence-based approach when they are implementing projects and programs. So that is the international context in which we're working. And as I said right at the beginning, this is all very welcome. The UN and IOM are now putting some wind in our sails and giving us an opportunity to do more in this area. So I was asked to reflect on what have we learned in the last few years. We started the center here in Berlin, the first global migration data center established by IOM in 2015. And we have been working with many countries across the world. And as I said, I think some things that I'm going to make a few general remarks. And this also has emerged from the discussions we've been having in the UN expert group on migration statistics. Too often, migration data is seen as a very technical subject, seen as the realm of the responsibility of national statistical offices. But often national statistical offices are in quite a weak position and they don't have good contacts with the policymakers, or they don't communicate well the data that they collect. And as I said at the very beginning, data is a cross-cutting issue and data is often not fully shared within and across countries. And one of the lessons that we have learned from looking at capacity building efforts around the world is that often countries are given support to collect data, but there's not enough emphasis on building the capacity of policymakers to actually make the best use of the data. And this is one of the big challenges, I think, moving forward. So in this, another lesson, I think, from our work is that the UN recommendations are very good. They encourage countries to report in the same way on certain key statistics. But the lessons learned from 1998 is that most countries have not fully adopted the UN recommendations. Most countries want to collect data on migration to meet their own needs and requirements. And when working with countries as IOM, we try to help the country concerned develop a tailored data strategy that is in line with their specific objectives. And countries have very different interests in the field of migration. But one common finding that we are seeing across countries is that, first of all the administrative data that governments collect for a variety of persons, when somebody comes to your country to work and you collect data from a work permit or a residence permit, all of this data is not being fully utilized. And all of the data that is emerging through new technologies in the private sector is still not being fully utilized. We have an expert group on migration statistics at the UN. We don't have a single representative from the private sector in that group. In January of this year, IOM organized with UNDESA and OECD the biggest global conference on migration statistics in Cairo. But we had relatively few representatives of from the private sector. So we need to do much more to engage with the private sector because they are increasingly producing relevant data on migration.
We have 2 minutes more.
Okay, one last thing. Keep in mind the political context. I think some of the background material for this meeting said that good data leads to better policies. Well, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. There is always a political context. The data doesn't speak for itself. It has to be interpreted, and different policymakers will interpret data in different ways. So, just a few things about what we're doing at GIMDAC. There are some resources which I can refer you to. We have something called the Global Migration Data Portal. We have created a data innovation directory in the last 2 months where you can find examples of what different countries and organizations are doing to use new technologies to promote better data on migration. There is now also, since last month, a special forum on migration and digitalization that we have launched within the framework of the UN Migration Network and under the presidency, under Germany's presidency of the European Union. This is an example of the data portal where you can find many more tools and resources which may be relevant to your work. And we have recently created a special section devoted to COVID-19 and migration. This is my last slide. If you look at that section, you can find all the latest data from IOM, key resources, and we've also issued some interesting blogs. For example, we've looked at how countries in Asia in the past have responded to pandemics and the extent to which migration has been factored into their national responses. So I hope I haven't, I'm within my time, Chair.
Perfectly.
I hope I haven't spoken too fast. And as I said, you can all receive a copy of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You were perfectly on time.
Thank you.
May I now call upon our second panelist, Professor S.K. Sasikumar. He is a senior fellow with the Vivigiri National Labour Institute. Dr. Sasikumar is an economist by training and holds a PhD degree in the discipline. He has more than 3 decades of research and training experience in the domain of labour studies. His main areas of professional interest include labour market analysis, future of work, labour migration, and research methods. He has been associated with various committees and commissions. He is a member of the national level commissions, technical committees like Study Group on Globalization, Second National Commission on Labour, Committee on Immigration Act, Government of India, Expert Group on Quarterly Employment Survey, Labour Bureau, Working Group on Employment with the Niti Aayog Committee to review legislations on labour migration, and Standing Committee on Labour Force Statistics, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation with the Government of India. Sir, again, you have 12 minutes. I'll give you a buzz after 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Debalina. Good evening, everyone. It's really a privilege to be part of this panel, comprising of some of the distinguished practitioners and scholars, and also in an audience where many of you are very familiar, working significantly in the area of migration. And I thank the Ministry of External Affairs and the India Center for Migration for providing me this opportunity. I'm sure all of us would agree that there cannot be a better time to discuss migration statistics than what we are doing it right now. Last 3 months, particularly for a country like India, say in the public space, migration has been very dominant, particularly in the context of internal migration, because we have seen large reverse flow of migration, and we have also looked at the limitations of the existing database in capturing the nuances of short-term migration. As the Joint Secretary and the Chairperson and CEO of the ICM rightly pointed out, we also saw a tremendous effort, a path-breaking effort of bringing back 600,000 Indians. It's not an easy thing to bring back that much number of people in a crisis situation. India has done it earlier also, right from the Gulf crisis of 1990. And every time there's a learning, and I'm sure there's a learning from this also. We have already brought back, I think, around 1/3 of the workers. I mean, people who have been brought back are workers, distressed workers. So it means a lot. So it's a fantastic time. And I'm so happy that the ICM is initiating this, because I believe that in spite of the fact that migration, international migration, is so central to India, historically, contemporary, but the kind of public policy attention that it has derived is somehow or other a bit missing. Many a times it is for the wrong reasons that sometimes it gets highlighted. One of the reasons could be that we do not focus on creating appropriate information base. Could be. And that is what I would like to focus. We all know that the existing database on international migration in India can be looked at from a stock data. You have the UNDSA data, you have the Ministry of External Affairs estimates, and the flow data basically emanating from the immigration clearances. And we know that these data sources, particularly the immigration clearance data source, has a limitation. When in 1983, the Immigration Act was promulgated, the whole idea was that people below graduation had to procure the immigration clearances, and larger number of countries. But now, over a period of time, as a part of India's liberalization strategy, we have reduced it. Right now, only those who are below matriculation and also to 18 countries require it. So obviously, it's a partial data, but it's a very important data. What is it that we need to go ahead from here in terms of information base? How do I, as a researcher who has been working in the area of migration, constitute it? First and foremost, I believe what should be the fundamental objectives of improving the database? What do we want to achieve? The first thing that we would like to, at least I would like to highlight, is we need to improve migration outcomes. We need to improve migration outcomes. Second, we need to reduce vulnerabilities of the workers. Third, we need to facilitate regular migration. Fourth, we need more and more regional and international dialogue and cooperation. To me, all this should be achieved only through one approach. And what is that approach? Our information should be migrant-centric. Any effort on strengthening the information base on migration statistics in India should be migrant-centric. What do you mean by migrant-centric? Let me elaborate by taking an example. Remittance data. I've written about this for an IOM ADB work in 2005, and I'm happy that a lot of things have happened subsequently. And even today, say we are very proud that India is the country with the largest remittance flows. Remittance data per se, the quantum of data, we have 70 billion, 60 billion, etc., is very important. But important for what? That is important for primarily foreign exchange management. This is very well demonstrated when we had a huge foreign exchange crisis in 91, and how remittance played a very significant part in cushioning off those deficits, balance of payments deficits. Now, as far as migrant-centric approach is concerned, for me, it's not the quantum of remittances which is important. It is the cost of remittances which is more important. Remittance cost. Because even today, if you go to Gulf countries, I interact with a large number of, being a researcher, both recruiting agents, workers, policymakers. Even today, sending remittances for many people is a very costly affair. Why is it so? Why is it so? We have strong remittance cost database on India, and we should be providing it to migrants. But this is it has got a lot of advantages. The advantages, it will increase the flow of remittances through the formal channels. Because many of these migrants get, say, trapped by sending money through informal means. We don't want that. We want formal channels, which has got a lot of benefits. That's why data information policy can definitely make vulnerabilities less. That's what we should be aiming at. And then, how can we look at what kind of data we require, actually? I think we should follow a migration cycle approach. is the data that we require in the pre-migration phase? What is the data that we require about at the destination? What is the data that we require at the return reintegration? So, considering that migration, most of the contemporary migration has a cyclical character, we can easily identify within each one of these subsets of phases different categories of data. What do we have? Where do we need to pitch in? That should be a good approach. Plus, we need promotional data. We need promotional data. Somebody from NSDC will be speaking subsequently. I'm sure that the whole idea of skill in the context of migration has to be pitched from a promotional perspective. What kind of data we require? Administrative data? Definitely yes. Because survey data, if you look at, say, migration, internal migration, the census is the most important survey data. But then it proved completely inadequate because it focuses more on lifetime migrants. 2011 data. We don't have any data on short-term migrants. So what is the point in trying to address, even today, in Supreme Court, this has been filed. Say, census data doesn't have much validity for short-term migrants. I'm talking internal migrants. Likewise, some of these surveys do not provide the kind of data that we actually require. So we have to focus more on administrative data also. But some data can be generated only through surveys, Because if you ask a person, what is your recruitment cost? It is very central. I'm sure she or he is not going to reveal the correct figure in an administrative manner. There is where you need limited surveys conducted by, say, research organization. That's why that, say, a synergy between research organizations and Ministry of External Affairs becomes very important. And generate such kind of survey data. So in the pre-migration phase, for me, one of the most important things if you want to really intervene is recruitment cost. We know recruitment cost is high. Everybody knows. But why are we not able to reduce it? We should reduce it. I was involved. I did the 2 surveys for the Nomad in India. The India-Qatar survey and India-Saudi Arabia survey. I know the figures very well. Of course, in India-Qatar survey, the differences between, at that point of time, Qatar was highly watched. So lots of people who went to Qatar during that time, the actual wages, etc., that they reported was very close to the minimum referral wage fixed by the Ministry of External Affairs. But that is not the case in the context of India-Saudi Arabia survey. The costs were very high. The wages reported were actually much lower than what the minimum referral wages indicate. Talking about minimum referral wage, it's an excellent initiative. Sita Sharma, who is sitting here, and myself had done a paper which has been used by the Ministry of External Affairs, where we showed that there is a problem in terms of the actual data. It's a little lower than that. So we need certain surveys to identify these anomalies at points of time so that we use that as a means to correct our evidence-based policy. Administrative data, EMIGRATE. I must compliment the Ministry of External Affairs. I know about immigration clearance data from 1980s. I did my PhD using this data, 1980s. And it is an excellent initiative. So much so that I use that as a case study for demonstrating how technology can be embedded in governance structures for improving the outcomes of migration of vulnerable people. Yes, there are many things can be improved, but it's an excellent initiative. When I teach that in an international course, especially of the emerging economies under the ITEC program, many countries appreciate it significantly. EMIGRATE, what can we do? Some of the data in the immigration has become already disaggregated. We even get district-wise data. I'm so impressed. We have district-wise data, but we can disaggregate it a bit in terms of age, in terms of gender. You have the data. It's only that you have to put it in the public domain in terms of skill, in terms of occupation. That will help researchers and practitioners to provide you more insights into how the immigration is actually working at the field level. As far as the post-migration destination is concerned, as I said, remittance cost is most important. Wage data is very significant. The wages that they have in the recruitment contract and the wages actually they draw, they have a difference. So we need to try to reduce we need to bridge this. That's very important. As far as promotional is concerned, skill, the person next will be speaking about it. You really need an assessment of the skills, in emerging skills, not only skills. We need assessments about the emerging economic structures. I was reading recently about GCC. GCC is more than the skill. The economic structure is changing. It's completely moving away from an oil to a non-oil economy. So naturally, if you're really interested in promoting migration, we should be understanding economic structures as also. Then we should use these data, and we should have what I should say, a group of experts, including experts on statistics, including experts on migration, including policy experts, who can bring out once in a while or once in a quarter or something like that, certain corridor-specific data-based analysis. Because that is also very important. That's the only way that we can make migration into the public domain. And lastly, I also believe that there is a very strong need to create synergy between research institutions and the data generating institutions and the Ministry of External Affairs. But it's a three-way connection. That can actually go a long way, as I said, in improving migration outcomes, number one, reducing vulnerabilities, number two, and improving the, cooperation between regional cooperation and also facilitating regular migration. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. May I call upon the third panelist, Mr. Shahbaz Khan, who is the Deputy Head, International Collaboration and Regional Lead, Gulf, NSDC. Mr. Shahbaz has been looking after international collaborations in TVET sector with various countries, including Australia, Morocco, Denmark, Maldives, Singapore, and United Kingdom. Three major focus areas of his work have been capacity building, global workforce mobility, and technical assistance. He was awarded the Vice Chief of Army Staff Commendation Medal for his contribution in the skill development to the Army. He is also closely involved with the Swadesh portal launched by NSDC to do the skill mapping of returning migrant workers. So the floor is yours. You have 12 minutes. I'll give you a buzz after 10 minutes.
Right. Thank you, Chair. I believe I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Respected Honorable and the fellow speakers, thank you. At the onset, we would like to congratulate ICM for taking up this important aspect of migration in line of their other webinars which they have been conducting since the past few months. And this particular webinar topic is very important, which can actually support to develop strategies which can enhance the migration of right set of candidates for the right set of jobs in the right set of markets. It has been a pleasure to hear from the fellow speakers in which we have been able to highlight few needs of the hour to develop a comprehensive policy to create this database and chalking out our migration aspects and the various benefits which it can lead for a policy maker as well as migrants, I think was aptly highlighted by Dr. Sasi Kumar just before this. Though we have been asked specifically to talk about the Swadesh initiative, but I believe it is important we also share about the details which Dr. Sasi Kumar just made us realize that it's important to also promote India as a brand of skilled workers or skilled migrants which can actually take up opportunities anywhere in the world. And in this, actually, NSDC has been spearheading the efforts of the Government of India for creation of a comprehensive database of skilled and certified candidates in India. We have a portal which is called the Skill India portal, which not only manages the entire candidate life cycle from mobilization to certification, it also is a forum which connects all different stakeholders who are involved in the various skilling aspects. If you talk about the data per se, as on date, we have close to 20 million people who have been certified in the past few years in more than 30 sectors. So we do have, as Dr. Sasi mentioned, in terms of advocacy of the migrants, we do have this large pool of certified candidates available who could be either directly roped in by these international employers or with only few modules of an upskilling could actually take on the world in terms of a skilled job. The MEA's efforts and initiative have been tremendous in terms of mapping the migrants who are traveling. However, what we feel, and I believe Mr. Vinay, the next speaker, would also be sharing it in details on the work which the MEA has done on the e-migrate. We feel that there is a need to possibly expand it to the extent, and as rightly mentioned with Ramu sir also, that is only been looking after the ECR candidates, also moving towards the specific 18 ECR countries. There's a need to capture at the government level at a larger database of people who are moving from India to overseas. And also this is as of now amongst the stakeholders, if you look at, and we have been in discussion with various stakeholders involved in the overall value chain of international migration. E-migrate as of now, it's more looked at as a policy requirement rather than a portal which could actually facilitate migration. So that people see that e-migrate portal as just as a tick in the box in terms of sending that individual rather than being on that portal so that it could actually promote mobility. And in this particular aspect, we have been in touch with the MEA, and there has been various discussions which have been undertaken how we could map the Skill India portal database of skilled candidates with the e-migrate, which would not only lead to having this access of available skilled workforce for international employers, but also for people who are in India. For instance, the recruitment agencies who have been working in this business, they could also tap into this particular database and mobilize them for overseas opportunities. And to take this step forward, what we have done is recently launched a network called the India International Skills Center, which is the ISC network, which basically is a platform for all the organizations who are in the overseas mobility space to come together and look into the various aspects of counseling, mobilizing the right set of people through the right set of guidance, upskilling, assessment certification leading towards the international equivalences, as well as pre-departure orientation training. So all these aspects are very critical in terms of promoting the mobility of the migrants, and the database forms the backbone of the set of to do these efforts. And the work which we have done with Skill India portal, I'm sure with the new migration bill which the MEA is working on, there are talks about capturing the right set of data for even the ECNR category holders. And I believe the availability of skilled certified workers from our portal could also be roped in. And with this new ISC network, so any individual who's actually being undertaking a training on a market-driven model could also be looked into getting captured at the right space. We're also, when we talk about database, it's also important, and when we talk about database related to skilling, it's also important to see how we could create this database of comparable Indian qualifications. And in this regard, we have been fortunate to have the extended support of the MEA, and along with the NSDC, we have been working with various countries to synergize and create a skill harmonization framework, which is basically linking the qualifications from one country to the other, and hence creating this set of data of comparable qualifications, which in turn on ground leads to the right set of people getting created, and as it helps in building confidence in the various organizations in the countries of destination, so that there are people in this particular source country which could be tapped in. And this integration we would be as like a supporting aspect of the work which the MEA is doing with the e-migrate integration with other labor ministries of various countries to integrate the right set of data points, and having this skill linking of the particular individual would also be helpful to promote the ethical migration of people from India. Specifically coming to the area of discussion which we have been told to is the newly launched initiative which Ramu sir also mentioned in his remark, is this Swades initiative, which is short form for Skilled Workers Arrival Database for Employment Support. While majority of the discussion have been on how we could do the right set of database for people who are moving from India overseas, this particular initiative was launched due to the current ongoing pandemic and is being launched jointly between the Ministry of External Affairs, Civil Aviation, as well as our Ministry of Skills. to create this database of qualified citizens who are returning because of this situation at hand, and to link them to particular opportunities post their skill mapping, which could fulfill the demand of Indian as well as the foreign companies. We have been active since the past 1.5 months. Until date, we have done, there have been registrations of close to 28,000 citizens who have registered for this Swadesh skill card. And if you talk about some basic analysis, there have been the top countries, including these Gulf, because we all are aware that majority of our overseas migrant workers are residing in the Gulf. So close to 80% of these people who have filled for this registrations are from Gulf, and they're also in various sectors, including construction, oil and gas, tourism, automotive, and IT, ITS. If you talk about the top receiving Indian states, this is Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, UP, Karnataka. So what we've been able to do, even though the MEA has that larger database of people who are coming back, through the Swadesh initiative, we actually know what is their skill level in terms of to create this whole network of upskilling programs for these people for the domestic as well as international opportunities. It also provides support in terms of the state governments to derive their own policies around creating jobs for these individuals. So the skill mapping is hence very important. And though we have done this effort for in the past few months, and 30,000 have already filled this form, we're already in touch with the MEA to expand this to all the citizens who have come back. So we'll be now doing an advocacy drive to these people so as to they could also fill this form. I believe, just summarizing a few, though we talk about immigration as well as repatriation and then reintegration. So as Dr. Sasi mentioned, though it's all cyclical movement, it is important that we have few broad areas, and this we personally are speaking. And if you talk about immigration, there is definitely a need of skill profiling of citizens who are potential migrant workers. And in that regard, I believe it is important. Some other countries, if we learn from, have introduced this concept of skill passports for the potential migrant, which is basically a summary of the skill sets which these individuals have. So I believe with this integration of Skill India portal in the MEA or with close coordination, we could create a strategy in which we're able to create the skill passport or an equivalent name for an individual, so that it helps to push or advocate these set of people at the international levels. This database collection timing is also very critical. Is when do you actually reach out to that potential migrant? Currently, if you look at the EMIGRATE, the database is being collected of people who are leaving the country, not more so, and have more or less have got the job, have got an interaction with the individual. If you look at the flip side of it in terms of collection of even a demand aggregation from employers and then reaching out to these set of people who already are there online. As of now, it is mostly being done through an unofficial channels driven by the recruitment agencies. But can we have technological interventions to have this mapping of demand versus skill candidates through an IT portal? I think it would be very important to actually look into the aspects. The other aspect which we feel is also critical, yes, is also very critical, is the comprehensiveness of the database. So comprehensive of the database, because as even though MEA is spearheading this activity at the national level, there are a lot of work which is being done by the state governments, by the recruitment agencies, few of our skill training partners. So there is no common database available at the Government of India level, which would actually aid in creating various policies around the migration, or could actually support in terms of building this brand India. So I believe this continuous reach out to various stakeholders, and hence this network concept of India International Skills Center, when we launched, the idea was to bring in one platform different stakeholders who are into migration and provide them those opportunities which will actually aid or enhance the migration and the migrant workers, which is also, I believe, important to be looked at. Also in terms of the aspect is this continuous updation. Even though this takes care of the earlier point of cyclical migration. So until unless we are not aware of how this international migrant worker, we don't have the database of this worker overseas and how he's progressing or he or she is progressing in his international job experience, and when is he coming back, when is he supposed to go back again. So this continuous cyclical track, as Dr. Sasi also mentioned, is very critical, and this could be easily done in terms of linking it to the current passport database which the MEA itself has, or the registration, as sir mentioned, in terms of the other stakeholders. And so this skill updation profiling is also very critical to give them the right set of opportunities in the future. And the quality, I believe the quality in terms of the right details available so that individual could be reached out to the right by the right set of people, and having this access to the rights organizations and stakeholders is also very critical at the same time when we are creating this data. So few pointers which as we have been working on would be more than keen, and in any case we're working very closely with the ME on various aspects, and I believe we could work together to take the PM's vision of making India the skill capital of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May I now call upon the final panelist, Mr. Vinay Kumar, Technology Specialist, Emigrate, who has been associated with this project for the past 10 years as a part of the project monitoring group. He has been in charge of the digitization of immigration-related services under EMIGRATION, which is immigration clearance, recruitment agents registration, and renewal and foreign employers registration. You have 12 minutes with you. I'll give you a buzz after 10 minutes. The floor is yours, Mr.
Thank you, ma'am. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vinay, and I am a part of EMIGRATE project monitoring group, which is set up by the Overseas Employment Division of the Ministry of External Affairs for the monitoring of the project. I'm also joined by my teammates, Ms. Rashmi and Mr. Kulbhushan. Mr. Kulbhushan is from TCS, the agency who has developed the EMIGRATE system for the ministry. And then I'm thankful to ICM for considering EMIGRATE team for the participation in this event. We hope to learn from this experience and will try to incorporate the learnings in the project development and further proceedings. So we can start now with a brief presentation. So my colleague Rashmi will share her screen. Yeah, so the topic is very relevant for us as well. Strengthening evidence-based approach to migration policies, challenges and solution for data collection. So I would like to say that EMIGRATE is one of the biggest data collection exercise, and definitely there are some challenges and there have been many challenges. So we have overcome most of them now, and we can say that the data collection, the data we are collecting is very consistent. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. Hello, yeah. One second, please. I think. Okay, slide is working now. So this through the EMIGRATE system, we are implementing the Indian immigration system. As Mr. SK also highlighted that there is this Immigration Act 1983. So what we do through the EMIGRATE project. So we have a large number of data, that's the registration data, and we have various modules like foreign employer registration. So at present we have around 0.2 million foreign employers registered with the system. And there is also a provision for the registration of foreign recruiting agents. There is not much difference for us between foreign employer and foreign recruiting agents. So they have a similar procedure for the registration. We also have Indian recruiting agents, which are 1,500 approximately. And in the past 3-4 years, after the advent of the EMIGRATE system, we have seen a very large growth in this registration process. And the ministry has also started a new scheme for the registration of recruiting agents with a lesser amount of bank guarantee. So we are around 1,500, and some 2 years ago we were around 1,000. And we have one more important data which Shahbaz was also pointing out. So this data is the jobs demand. So annually there is around 1 million vacancies which are registered by the employer in the system to the recruiting agents. So the immigration, this EMIGRATE system is not only about capturing the EC data, but it is also, there are so many things. One is the demand data. So we know at present what kind of jobs are in demand particularly in the ECR countries, what kind of skills are needed. So each country, each employer, we have that detail. And this EC data also we are capturing approximately 0.4 million. So it is 4 lakh per year in the Indian terms. And that number is fluctuating at the moment. Some years ago it was around 8 lakh or 0.8 million. Right now it is around 0.4 million. And since 2015 we have also started capturing the data of nurses. That is also very important data. So around 10,000 nurses are going every year to the ECR countries and mainly to the GCC countries. There is a very big demand for the nurses. Even this lockdown period also, nurses are continuously going. Foreign employers are arranging special flights for them, and these nurses are going. And we are also integrated with the seafarer system. Seafarer system is maintained by the DG Shipping of Government of India, and we are integrated with them. And there are around 0.3 million seafarers are going annually, and this data is captured for all countries, not only for ECR countries. So we can see EMIGRATE system is basically built for ECR immigrants. That number stood at 0.4 million, but through the technological advance we could extend it to the seafarer also. So that data is around 0.3 million. So on an average, we are capturing around 0.7 million immigrants data annually, and we have very granular details about them, their skills, age, gender, states, district, particular city, village. It's a very in-depth data, undoubtedly. And then there is a provision which is optional at the moment for registering the immigrants who are not requiring EC. So approximately around 80,000 people are getting registered in this category. And one of the important aspect of the immigration is insurance policy. So the insurance policy systems, it is also integrated to the EMIGRATE system. So we issue, so every immigrant who is taking EC clearance requires this insurance policy. Next slide, please. And as we are talking earlier, the biggest challenge in the data collection is the data consistency. So how we are able to maintain the data consistency, you can see. So this immigrant data, the data is verified with the passport system, his name, father's name, date of birth, everything is verified. So it is very consistent in that way. Foreign employers data, it is verified with the respective Indian mission. So we know the phone number, address, other relevant details of the foreign employers which are relevant in case of any issue. EC data of the emigrant is verified by the protector of emigrant. So all details is job detail, visa copy, visa detail, name of foreign employer, everything is verified. Recruiting agents data, their offices, branch offices, everything is under the EMIGRATE system. It is verified by the PG division and POE as well. Seafarer data, as I was saying earlier, is verified by the DG shipping system. And we also have the travel status, whether the immigrant who has taken or registered with the EMIGRATE system has departed from India or not. So we have both inward and outward journey detail. This data is captured by the Bureau of Immigration at the airport at the time of the person is departing or arriving, and they share this data in turn with the EMIGRATE system. So
2 more
we have
minutes.
that detail also. Yeah. Someone is saying something?
Yeah, you have 2 more minutes.
Okay. And this insurance policy system, they are also well connected with the EMIGRATE. Next slide, please. Data access. So our data is accessible to a certain extent. One can verify the foreign employer name, recruiting agent name, whether these are the fake agents or the real agent or the employer actually existing or not. And immigrants also, recruiting agents also, they can see the copy of the important document like passport copy, visa copy, employment contract, insurance policy. These are now approachable by the immigrant also. There is a requirement for OTP or the application number something, email notification, SMS notification. These are the very common things these days. And this EMIGRATE system is also integrated with the Umang app of Mighty for wider reach. And one can log in through this Umang app and then can check his EMIGRATE details. Next slide. And this data can be used for verification, transparency, policy formulation, plugging any operational gaps which we may find, intergovernment dialogue. The MEA or the government of India is continuously talking to all other relevant countries, and we are using this data extensively. And now the EMIGRATE system is a platform which is readily available for any future enhancement. We can use it the way we want. Like if we want to include everyone on the portal like ECNR passport holder, we can do it. We have a platform ready, and as and when a policy requires it, we can do it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. One more slide is there, and there could be some barriers also. Even though we have mostly overcome all those barriers, but India being a large country, there could be some issues. So one thing which the concept paper also identified is a systematic underreporting. So stakeholders in the system, they may not be reporting the whole data. As and when they are finding some loophole, they will try to not to report some data. So, but we are trying how we can plug that also. There could be internet, computer related issues. The EMIGRATE is very dependent system. There is a computer required for it. So, and there could be an issue with the manpower engaged by the recruiting agent to operate EMIGRATE. There could be a possibility that there is a lack of training to them. We will see how we can make them more trained. And one challenge is that immigrant himself is not very much connected with the system. So we are seeing how we are able to mitigate those issues in future. And we will like to learn from you or hear from you what kind of challenges they see in our data. We'll try to improve from here. Okay, that's it from my side.
Thank you. May I now call upon Ms. Tavishi Behal Pandey to come and speak for 2-3 minutes, give her views.
Hi, good afternoon to all of you. Am I audible?
Yes. You are.
Yes, thank you. Just couple of points I wanted to make because recently Vinay had been kind enough to share a lot of data which I shared with Bihar government, especially because of the incoming migration. And as you know that Bihar is almost the number one state from our country who's sending migrants abroad. So one of the main challenges which I faced and which Bihar administration also shared with me, that once we captured the incoming data, so most of their credentials, that's the phone number and as well as the addresses, were out of date because probably it had been couple of years that they had gone abroad and hence their data was not updated. We were banking upon the data which was 2 and 3 years old, and especially with ECR category of migrants, it is difficult to have a permanent address or even a phone number. So for that, if e-migrate team and the ministry deems fit, I think we should have, as had also been mentioned by Dr. Sasi Kumar, that we should have a migrant-centric approach also, and probably we can provide them login IDs where they have the power to update their personal information, which can be subsequently used by various recruiting agents as well. Supposing that there is also a case if a passport is lost or a new passport is issued. I don't know, but according to my understanding till date that we don't have a system wherein those passport details could be updated by the migrants from the place where they are working. So probably creating login IDs for the migrants is going to help us in keeping our data up to date, and to incentivize them, we can have a approach which my colleague from NSDC has mentioned, that we can create a sort of a virtual employment exchange where not only the data of the migrants can be seen by RAs or FEs, even the demands which are being raised by RAs and FEs could be checked in by the intending migrants. So I think having a two-way street is going to be really helpful, because my main concern is that once they are returning, the data which we get is not in very useful terms to do something with them or to track them and to skill them also if it is needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before I throw open the floor for an open discussion, let me just point out to the key takeaways from today's discussion. I believe migration data is important for policy making, evidence-based migration policies per se, but its relevance has come to the forefront with the outbreak of the pandemic, when thousands of people are coming back from overseas to India, and there are various concerns which are being flagged, which all of us are aware. And I think each of the panelists has brought to the floor, highlighted very clearly the importance of data. The first panelist, Dr. Frank, I think he brought, he highlighted the important initiatives taken by IOM and the UN in launching a migration data strategy, the challenges thrown up by the COVID-19 for data collection agencies, and also the increasing demand for data from policy makers across the globe. Again, Professor Shashikumar rightly pointed out that we do not, as of now, have an appropriate database, be it stock data or flow data, and we need to improve the migration outcomes, redress the vulnerabilities, promote more of regional cooperation while we are managing and working on data. And any effort in this regard should be migrant centric. I think that's a very important point, and we should look at the migration cycle. And administrative data is also important, and corridor specific data analysis is another area where we need to concentrate. And there should be, again, pooling of experts to and draw synergies between data generating entities or institutions, and also the research institutions who really work on the data which is being generated by various data generating agencies. Our third panelist did bring to the table the importance of AMIA's efforts in migrants, the e-portal, which tries to promote mobility-related data, need to capture data of non-migrants from India to overseas, database related to skill mapping, skill harmonizing frameworks, comparable qualifications need to be strengthened. The Swasthisi initiative, which is a more recent initiative, I think that also needs strengthening. The skill passport, which he mentioned, that's also another important area where we need to work hard to prepare a comprehensive database where skill upgradation and the quality improvement in terms of the right details of migrants is needed. And our panelists did bring to the table the importance of e-migrant project and how that could help us in really putting up the database on the e-migrants as a whole. So thank you so much. We have some time for questions, 4 minutes. I think in the chat box, we do not have specific questions, but if the participants would like putting questions, they are most welcome. Dr. Shurbi, what will you take up from?
We can take a few questions from the floor before we give the mic back to the panelists to respond in general. I think
Yes, you.
Sita, do you have a query? I see Sita asking to. Yes.
Thanks. Yes. So actually, this is a great question. Thank you very much to all the speakers. I think there's a lot to take away from all of this. But one of the things, and not, the great work that's going on through the eMigrate in terms of capturing data and, notwithstanding the great efforts that are being made also by skills, which Shaba spoke about. But I'm going to, take it away a little bit further to what Frank was really saying and what Shashi was also saying in terms of it looking at political context as well as the migrant centric, and maybe in this case also looking at the country because we're looking at a pandemic. The thing, and this was brought up in the new immigration bill, is if we don't find a way to capture all the data, and really I agree, you've got low skill data and you're putting a lot of effort there. But let's say, for example, we're looking at a pandemic now. We don't have a clue where the doctors are. For example, we don't know how many of them are leaving. I know that they are leaving. We don't have a sense of some of this. We just have no data. Also, a lot of our students go and convert to workers in other countries. Absolutely no data on this. So I think there was an effort in the e-migrant, the new bill, to try and make it mandatory for data to be collected when people were leaving the country. I know this met some level of political resistance, but what I'd like to hear perhaps from Frank and any of the other speakers is, do countries gather all the data, and how exactly do they manage to do this? Because, when thinking of India, it's mandatory because they have to get clearance, but that's only for one group. For those that don't need clearance, how will that data actually come into a system? Because I think it's absolutely critical that we get all the data in. Thanks.
I think we have POE Chennai as well, who wants to make a point.
Can I speak up?
Yes, madam, go ahead. POE Chennai, can you listen to us? Can you just make your interventions?
I can hear.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Please make your point.
Yeah, we are having problem in capturing data even through eMigrate. What happens is foreign employers contact the registered agents or other contacts in India and take employees directly through various other visas, circumventing eMigrate registration, both at the Indian missions and in the state particularly concerned. Then this is the case mainly with short-term projects. So most of the numbers that are going out on short-term projects, they don't register through the eMigrate, and that doesn't register with us. Another this thing is where the foreign employers register directly for limited numbers. What they are doing is they are tweaking the registration numbers slightly to get in more numbers. This we had pointed out repeatedly to the central processing team at Delhi, and we have got certain cases noticed by them, and we have stopped the clearance of such agents. This is one challenge. Another challenge, what happened is I have witnessed a couple of Vande Bharat mission flights that come back from Kuala Lumpur particularly because this area is concentrated with workers going to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Singapore, that belt. What happened is it was very obvious that women returning and some workers returning were actually repatriated or sent back due to the work being terminated, etc. But whenever questioned, they mentioned that they had just gone on a tourist visa, which was quite obvious that that is not the case. And I've taken this up with the BOI
Tourist visa.
The BOI authorities have conveyed certain challenges at this point. They said that the points for checking persons departing were very limited. So if they stop such persons, they get into a lot of court cases. Another problem that they faced was people offloaded at one airport in a particular state or city, take another route or another city or even a state. So such data don't come into the arena of even the BOI authorities. So these challenges are there when we particularly consider registering numbers. This is what I just wanted to bring in. Thanks.
Dr. Daria, he would like to say something.
Lina, it has been a very, very educative, session with all the speakers, focusing on different non-overlapping aspects. So in that sense, it has been covering a lot of ground. And only to point out some of the things that Frank has mentioned about interpretation of the data, that I think is absolutely critical. And for that, capacity building is needed. We cannot be simply wishful and think that interpretation would come. Different interpretations in terms of contradictory interpretations of the same data, that exercise needs to be inbuilt in terms of orientation. And for that, we first of all, of course, need to understand the data. I think survey-based data, for example, Sasikumar had mentioned the importance of that. That's because this is current data that we need. We cannot rely on data which is very, very old and obsolete. Census data becomes available after 7-8 years. By that time, it loses its relevance. And similarly, NSSO data has its own difficulties and so on. So I think specific survey-based data are very, very important to drive the policy making. That I think is extremely important. And also in terms of the demand side, that is Mr. Khan had mentioned that we cannot only think in terms of because we want to send large number of Indian skilled people to other countries, we should not forget what is coming, it has to be futuristic. The data collection and data understanding and interpretation and accessibility has to be futuristic in terms of what is coming. For example, from the demand side, what kind of, like somebody mentioned just now about doctors and nurses and health professionals, they are going to be in the forefront of demand side. And you can see even in the case of United States, all kinds of exemptions are being given to the doctors and nurses and other health workers when restrictions are being imposed on H1, L1 and other green card holders and so on. So we cannot just take one broad brush. We need to disaggregate and look into the details when we are trying to build data, and that I think would be a great. Other thing that I would of course like to mention are the barriers that were mentioned by the last speaker. That I think is extremely important. Those barriers, underreporting is dangerous. It's dangerous, it's risky. If we allow underreporting and other kinds of manipulation in the data, then we are in for trouble. So I think we need to take this into account. We need to orient our policymakers, our bureaucrats who are going to handle those kind of data and interpretations. And, lastly, what Sasikumar said, you have to work in tandem with the experts, with the scholars, with the policymakers. So different stakeholders in terms of who can contribute to data generation, data understanding, data interpretation, and policy making should be roped in. Thank you. I enjoyed thoroughly the session.
Now, I would request the panelists to come back with their observations. Dr. Frank, if you would like to come back.
Thank you so much. I participate in many different webinars on this subject, as you can imagine. And I would like to congratulate all of you on an extremely rich discussion today. I've really enjoyed it, and I found it very, very valuable for our work here. And I hope that we can continue to build on this conversation, because I didn't have time to fully explain that one of the things that we are trying to do is to work with countries to see what data they need to help them best address the migration aspects of the current global pandemic. And we have identified a number of priority areas in IOM. For example, we're looking at the socio-economic impacts on migrants. We're looking at the implications for development. We're looking at the implications for health systems. Now, all of that is going to require some effort if it's going to be done in a coordinated and systematic way. We have many data sources. We know the key data sources. They have been mentioned. You have censuses, you have surveys, you have administrative data, and we also have a lot of data that is coming from ad hoc private sector sources that we're not fully tapping into. And then there is a range of data which is collected outside of India by other countries, which is relevant to your own development and future. And there is a whole question about understanding what's going on now, but also thinking about the future and how we can forecast and plan for the future using different scenarios. And we will be organizing, for example, in September, a major conference looking at new tools to help us forecast migration in different ways. So my takeaway message from all of this is I would love to continue to engage with you. I really enjoyed today's conversation, and it will be really interesting for us to look at what happens next in India. We are embarking now on an international comparative study where we're looking at 8 countries around the world, and we're trying to understand in depth how are those countries trying to manage data on migration. What challenges do they face, not only in relation to COVID, but also in relation to reporting on the SDGs, on the Global Compact on migration, what sort of innovation efforts are in place, etc. Now, we haven't fully decided on which countries we're going to select among the 8. Maybe there's even a possibility that we include a focus on India. If there is an interest on your part, please, whoever needs to get in contact with me, please contact me after this meeting. So thank you again. I've really enjoyed today, and I hope we can continue to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Surabhi, could you tell us what is the next?
If none of the other panelists, do any of the other panelists have any points of intervention? If then we can perhaps take that, and then we close it towards the vote of thanks.
I'll just take 2 minutes.
Yes, yes.
First, what Sita raised is a very fundamental issue, because we need to go beyond ECR. How do we go about it? We need to look at it, because ECR might be a smaller group. ECNR is growing, as a consequence of which it's not very easy to capture it, because the number of countries are large, the number of occupations are vast. Most of them have been in foreign countries for a long time. Because of all this, we need to look at, as Frank was saying, say, what are the data sources in other countries? For example, we can use some of the countries like US. It's very easy to use the US data to arrive at the Indian occupation-wise category. Not very difficult. But that may not be the case in several other countries, like Gulf, maybe difficult. So we need to think about it. And second, gender disaggregation. Sita, you raised this very fundamental point, because we need to have more and more data disaggregated at the gender level. And the third point, which Vinod said, this is very important. Say we did this IL nomad survey. As I said, I did 2 nomad surveys. We used CAPE method for it. It was fantastic, I can tell you. And it's really necessary. It's really necessary that all government officials dealing with data are given competence building in CAPE. It's extremely important because it is such a great source. It's really good. I did with the ILO 1 program for Bangladesh in Delhi. It was such a useful thing, Say we integrated, because those who are working on migration may not have the data analytical sense sometimes. They're not required. So you have to merge this data analytical requirement, how survey is done, what kind of questions need to be posed. What do you think as a policy maker is very central to a survey? All this must come from the policy. Then only that synergy comes. As I know, like labor force surveys, consumer expenditure surveys, these are big surveys in India. And I'm sorry to say, most of the data that is collected is absolutely not used by the policy. So why do we need data collection at all? We need data that is used for policy, where the policy maker should be a very important stakeholder. Most important, capacity building is central. And I request Frank, because if you want a country really for studying international migration statistics, take India as the first one. Seriously, involve the Ministry of External Affairs. Good work is being done by how many countries would have brought back, Frank? 600,000 workers, 600,000 Indians. That's a big number. IOM was also involved in many of this repatriation earlier. And the last point is, we also need to think about data in a qualitative way. We always talk of numbers. Migration produces beyond numbers, experiences, processes. We need to document it. Some database on qualitative information emanating from migration. To me, that will make migration policy much more forceful, because data cannot speak. Numbers cannot capture everything. Experience can capture several things, especially when you talk about gender vulnerabilities of the workers. One case study must be good enough to illustrate the problems that the migrants encounter, not the grievance. That's the last point. Grievance data in India needs to be spurred up. We need better grievance data. Many of them are not getting reported. What kinds of grievances are coming in the countries? I don't know what is the best reporting system. So these are some of the points, and I also enjoyed. Thank you so much, all of you, for giving me this opportunity. ICM, the MEA, all the officials, and Frank and other panelists. Thank you, Shabas. Thank you so much, Vinay. It is and other participants for this enriching experience.
Shahbaz and Vinay, do you have any points to make?
Yeah, POE Chennai has made some remarks, so which are not quite audible. So I am going to contact her over the mobile so that I can see how we can.
Sure. So we can do that once we close the webinar. So with that, I think we'll move towards the vote of thanks. I will now request Director OIA1, Shri Piyush Gupta, to give the vote of thanks on behalf of ICM.
You need to unmute yourself.
I think he will be joining in from another connection. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you see me?
Mm.
Can you see me, Surbhi?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Surbhi. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of MEA and India Center for Migration, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers, Dr. Frank Laxo, Dr. Sasi Kumar, Mr. Sabaz, and Mr. Vinay for presenting their work and analysis on this crucial issue today. I would also like to thank our moderator, Professor Debolina Kundu, for efficiently coordinating the discourse. Let me also take this opportunity to express my gratitude to Shri Abhagini Ramu, our Joint Secretary, for delivering today's opening remarks. My sincere thanks to all invitees for their crucial insights and interventions on the issue. Reliable and meaningful data collection for managing immigration flows can be advantageous in not only aiding government's capacities to facilitate orderly migration. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in managing return and their reintegration also. For instance, due to COVID-19, distressed Indians in various destination countries needed support for return. Repatriation efforts began in a phased manner under the Vande Bharat mission from May 7, 2020. Out of 979,000 repatriation requests received by MEA, so far 664,000 have been repatriated from over 130 countries. Further, 107,000 have reached India through land crossings. Here, data collection in various forms has been crucial in executing the largest exercise as being in bringing back Indian citizens stranded abroad. In the context of the issue, challenges and opportunities that may ensue due to the changing migration flows, there is an emerging need to establish and promote a sound empirical basis for data collection. In my view, this panel discussion has succeeded in highlighting this crucial point. Perhaps I can end by emphasizing the need for coordinated mechanism between governments, international organizations, and private sectors so that these mechanisms allow data to be integrated together and delivered effectively. Let me thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us today, and we look forward to engaging you in our future initiatives as well. Thank you.